Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 48 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. Today is a fun episode. I feel like it's been forever since we've recorded. Well, it's been at least since the whole Will Stein debacle. That's why I didn't do this earlier in the week because, for one, here on the KSR YouTube channel, we had to save some time, some allotted space for just in case something happened, and it ended up happening with Will Stein getting hired, and of course you had the coordinator hire and all that kind of stuff. So and a really big time for the UK football program, we had to kind of save some time. Okay, let's make sure we get that football talk in, but now we have some time to talk some UK women's basketball. I want to get the show started by talking about the net rankings. Kentucky is number 8 in the net rankings. I feel like that's an interesting spot to be in because, first of all, Maryland, who you lost to, is number 10, right? So that's okay, that's a bit odd. And that was on a neutral court too. It was not even like Kentucky was on the road or at home or anything. It was a neutral court game. So I thought that was interesting. But you just look at the quad records in general, like the games that Kentucky has played, right? So Kentucky is 1-1 in quad one. Like I said, Maryland's number 10. Louisville is number 15. And of course, you went on the road and beat Louisville. I believe them keeping it really close with South Carolina actually helped them a lot. And speaking of South Carolina, Kentucky is actually 4th in the SEC in the net, behind number 2 LSU, number 4 Texas, and number 6 South Carolina. So that's where Kentucky stands in the net amongst its SEC peers. But going back to the actual quad records themselves, like I said, Maryland's number 10. I thought that was interesting, despite the head-to-head there. Miami, you see it's a quad 2 win for Kentucky at the moment. I think that can very well end up a quad 1. Miami right now is ranked number 47 in the net. Okay, that's got to be a top 45 win on the road for it to be quad 1. Again, I think I touched on this the last time we talked about the net, but in women's basketball, it's a much stricter formula. I want to say in men's basketball, if you go be a top 75 team on the road, it's quad 1. Well, in women's basketball, it's top 45, So, again, it's tougher to get quad 1 wins in women's basketball, but I think if Miami, they're 5-3 right now, but those are 3 good losses they have, if those exist. If Miami, keeps winning throughout non-con and maybe starts ACC playoff a little hot, that can end up being a quad 1 win for Kentucky. So I think Miami is a team that you're going to kind of be rooting for, to get another good resume win. Speaking of Miami, I'm trying to look through my graphics, and of course, I make these graphics, and then I do a horrible job of making sure I can find them. But Kentucky beat Miami. I was trying to find the graphic, but again, I make these things, and I do a horrible job of actually being able to find the graphic I made. There it is. All right, Kentucky defeats Miami 64-48. I titled it Louisville. It's the graphic I'm looking at right here. It's called Louisville, even though we play Miami. I got to start renaming the graphics apparently too. Kentucky beats Miami 64-48 in the SEC ACC Challenge, and this was a really close game to kind of start, right? You look through the game and, it's 16-13 after the first quarter and 26-23 at the half. And to start the game, you're like, oh gosh, they're sluggish from Puerto Rico. They spent too much time on the beach, having their, I don't know, what do you drink in Puerto Rico? I was going to say margaritas, but I don't know. I don't know. Regardless, jet lag, all that crap. You're better than Miami. It's a tough game. It's an ACC team on the road, granted, but you're better than Miami. But it's this tight game, and you're sitting there like, oh gosh, are they going to drop one they're not supposed to? At least with Maryland, you were kind of supposed to lose that game if you just look at it on paper. This is not one you were supposed to lose, but thankfully, in the third quarter, Kentucky went on a 12-0 run that, in my opinion, really kind of just set the pace for the rest of the game. I mean, you go on that 12-0 run, you're up, and then Miami really just can't do anything about it. They can't really catch back up. I thought it was interesting. Kenny downplayed a halftime adjustment, in the post game presser. Actually, funnily enough, it was just me and Kenny in the post game press conference. I assume the Miami women's basketball media presence isn't very strong. And of course, the day of this UK Miami game was the day of the Will Stein introductory press conference. So I think all of our UK peeps were focused on that. So it was just me and Kenny just kind of chatting back and forth. And, he downplayed the idea of this, I mean, he knows about halftime. Obviously, he knows he made a halftime adjustment and everything, but he mainly gave the credit to his players, talking about how they just started hitting shots. And I think that's something really important. Like I think about the men's team. Like coaching is a very big thing, and we got to hold Mark Pope accountable and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, dude, sometimes it also just comes down to players hitting shots and like putting the ball in the hoop. Like sometimes it's that simple, and that's kind of what happened for Kentucky in that second half. Of course, on the game, Kentucky only shot 44% from the field, but it looked a lot worse than that. It looked more like that 32% that Miami shot for the game for most of the game. And then, of course, Kentucky, like I said, kind of started to pick it up in the second half. Just 5 of 20, 25% three-point range. I think Kentucky's a little bit better than that, but I think we're kind of just getting a feel of what this team is as far as shooting the ball. Like, this is not a great three-point shooting team. I don't think they're abysmal. I don't think they're horrible, but this is not a great three-point shooting team. And, of course, I think 25% is a bit lower than what they are. I know they average like 31% for the year. I mean, obviously, if it's an average, that's about right. But, I feel like between 30 and 35% is what we can expect for this team, really for the whole year. But I want to talk about Toni Morgan because she, we know her to be this elite passer. We know her to be this awesome distributor. Like, there was that stat. Well, first of all, 16 assists, no turnovers against USC Upstate. And then I believe it was 9+ assists in 4 straight games. Well, she's kind of flipped the script a little bit. Now she has scored 20+ in 2 of her last 3 games. She had 22 against Maryland, had a good offensive outing there, and then has 20 against Miami here. 20 points, 7 of 14 shooting, and just 4 assists. So, like, the assist numbers, she's only averaging, I think, 8.2 assists on the year now. I say only. Isn't that crazy? Like, it's tied. I believe it's second in the country now. And we're talking about how she's only averaging 8.2 just because of what she did to start the year. But Toni Morgan, like, I'm really proud of the way, we spent all summer talking about it, and I almost started to worry, like, am I just, like, feeding into what people tell me and not really thinking about it? But we heard all summer long how Toni Morgan is this great scorer, about how she can really get downhill and score on you if need be. And, like, she can do that, right? And not actually, I look at the stats for her on the year, and it is 20+ points in 2 of the last 3, but she scored 19 on the road at Louisville. She only had 6 points against Morgan State, which I thought was interesting. But then again, she did everything else. She only played 24 minutes in that game. But, really since the Louisville game, she's been on a heater, just putting the ball in the hoop. And I asked Kenny about it in the post-game press conference, and I was like, hey, man, like, is this something you've asked her to do? Is putting the ball in the hoop, is scoring something you've wanted Toni to focus on more? And he was like, yeah, a little bit. He's like, we know. And he kind of echoed what I was saying a second ago, where it's like, we know Toni can pass the ball, and we love that she can do that. But sometimes we need her to be able to go get hers too. Sometimes you need Toni Morgan to be, I think about just basketball teams in general. As great as it is to be an all-around talented team, to be able to do things by committee, I think you just have to have that one player that can go get you a bucket. I think you just have to have that now. Like, and maybe that's the way it's always been, but I think you just have to have, you have to know that Toni Morgan, 10 seconds left in the game, can drive by, score a layup. You have to know you can feed it to Claire Strack and she can score. You have to know Jordan Obi can get down low and score. You have to know Asia Boone or Amelia Hask can hit the 3. You got to find You got to find that clutch player, and you got to find, okay, who shines under pressure? Like, who at the end of the day, at the end of the game, can I count on? When it's a timeout, right? You're sitting there, 20 seconds left in the game. You're sitting there, Kenny Brooks, clipboard in hand, drawing up a timeout. Who can I go to score? And I think maybe he's trying to figure that out if it's Tony Morgan or not. I just think it's interesting. Again, 20 points, two of her last three games, and of course 19 plus in three of the last four. So I think that is obviously interesting, and I think really worth keeping an eye on as we kind of see. Does Tony keep scoring, or does she go back to passing more? I think it'll just be good to kind of keep an eye on. Claire Strack was the next leading scorer on the team, 13 points, 6 of 15 shooting, 1 of 5 shooting from three. Shout out to Rashea Kyle, who on Miami, of course, she played at Florida last year. Like Claire Strack, from what I remember, kind of had not a field day, but was able to get really comfortable against Florida last year in that game, and that wasn't necessarily the case this time around. I think she did a good Rashea Kyle. I think she did a really good job of all right, Clara, you kind of bullied me last year. It ain't happening again. So Claire, of course, 6 of 15 shooting, not the best. Had 9 rebounds, 4 on the offensive glass, 5 on the defensive glass. 9 rebounds, 4 assists. I think you can take that any day of the week. Anytime Claire Strack is, tied for the team lead in assists alongside Tony Morgan and Amelia Hassett, of all people, who also had 4 assists, I think you have to be happy with that. Kenny calls her the best passing big in the country. I don't know, right? But I don't know if that's true. I'd have to really dive into those kinds of numbers. But anytime your center's putting up 4 assists per game, I think you'll definitely take that. And of course, what we do know about Clara Strack, just absolutely dominant on the defensive end of the floor. It does not matter, who they're playing. 4 steals, 2 blocks. It wasn't the case where she, completely dominated 8 blocks and whatnot. No, she 4 steals and 2 blocks. And I think I may have tweeted this or put it on the message board during the game. I don't remember, but I was really pleased with Clara's level of activity on the defensive end of the floor. You saw 4 steals, and I think that's important because Kenny Brooks' whole MO defensively is we are going to block shots. We are going to play our pack line defense. We're going to, draw you into the paint, and we're going to block your shot. Okay, we got 2 girls that are 6'5". We got the longest, tallest team in the SEC, and we're going to block your shots. Okay, and I think that's really good, and it's obviously worked out for them, and they execute it really well because you go look at the stats, and they lead the nation in blocks, block rate, all those kinds of things. Well, I think it's important as a team to be able to play, obviously blocking shots and that whole thing I just went through is your brand of defense. It's your identity. But if you can go get steals, if you can go force 9 steals in a game against a Miami, then why not, right? If you can create havoc and it's not, it's not like Kentucky was going away from their identity. It's just they found something else that was working, which was, for Clara Strack specifically, you attack the passing lanes a little bit. Maybe, and one even so much the guards getting out on the perimeter and doing that. Anytime Miami was trying to, get a post-entry pass, Clara Strack was there. Things like that. She led the team in steals. She had 4 steals. Tiani had 2 and Tony had 2. It's just so nice to see. One, Clara Strack can play basically any brand of defense you want. But number 2, so can the team. The team can do that really well. And I think that's really encouraging. Speaking of Tiani, like I said, she had 2 steals, but she also had 11 points on 4 of 6 shooting. I think you got to be happy with that. I do. Plus minus of 18. I actually thought it was funny. I asked Kenny post-game if he even looks at plus minus. And he was like, no, I think it's the stupidest stat ever. You're telling me you got one kid on the floor during a run and she has a great plus minus? What's that? And I get it to a degree because you look at Amelia Hassett. She led the team in plus minus with 26. Well, she scored 3 points on 1 of 7 shooting. So she didn't do a ton. but her plus minus is way up because she was on the floor whenever the team was doing well. I personally think there is some value in plus minus. Like I think I understand where Kenny's coming from. I think you do have to kind of be cognizant of like, okay, she was just on the floor during a run. It didn't do anything. But I do think there's also value, and he does too. I talked to him about it a little bit. There is value in like, okay, when this person's on the floor, that means we're doing well. So that probably means they should be on the floor. Because funnily enough, he was like, Phoenix, even though I don't like plus minus, I actually did look at it this game for Amelia. And that's, part of why we left her out there for 33 minutes. But like I said, Tiani Key, 11 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and like I said, that plus minus of 18. Again, I just think you have to be happy with that kind of performance because Tiani, it feels like she's been so up and down. But if she can give you that kind of outing consistently, I don't think you can be super mad at it. And then speaking of, performances you can be okay with, Jordan Obi, 9 points, 3 of 5 shooting, 3 of 5 from the charity stripe, whatever. And then 6 rebounds, 5 on the defensive glass. I think Kenny would like to see her crash the offensive boards a little bit more, but I don't think you're going to get super mad at that. And then 27 minutes for her. Like not like 9.6 rebounds. Like I think you can take that from Jordan Obi, especially in a game like that. So I don't think that's too bad. Now, I'm going to give a quick shout to our friends over at Roback for sponsoring today's episode and, of course, the last few episodes here of the Memorial Memo. Of course, when you look at Roback, you can change the game with Roback, a proud partner of KSR. You can get the best fit and best feel with their incredibly comfortable activewear. From polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta performance pants, you will look good and feel good with Roback. Use promo code KSR, that's KSR, for 20% off your first purchase at roback.com. So now, we've talked about Miami. You notice how I skipped over Maryland and Morgan State, by the way, because I know it's been a minute since we've recorded. Well, we lost one of those games, and who gives, we're moving on to bigger and better things, okay? Kentucky plays Central Michigan on Sunday at noon. I don't love that it's a noon game. Like, that feels weird. SEC plus, so again, and like a noon game on a Sunday, it just doesn't feel right. That does not rub me the right way. But Kentucky plays Central Michigan. First of all, the Cats are 2-0 all time against Central Michigan. They are ranked number 129 in the net. So that would be a quad 4 win for Kentucky. Of course, especially with that being a home game as well. But another thing about, a couple things about Central Michigan. So for one, you look at them, they only shoot the three-pointer 23% of the time. And you say, well, Phoenix, that's almost a quarter of their shots. Well, that's 318th out of 363 teams in the country. So, you know how earlier I was talking about that pack line defense, how Kentucky likes to, almost vacuum you into the paint? Well, naturally, they kind of do that. Like Central Michigan just kind of does that on their own. You know what I mean? Like Central Michigan will sit there and almost play to your style a little bit. And I think that's a big positive for Kentucky. Of course, I think in this game, you're just naturally better. You shouldn't really need big positives like that. But I think that's something interesting. Defense, not their thing. Okay. They average 6.4 steals per game, which is 328th in the country, and 2.1 blocks per game. Clara Strack averages more blocks per game than the entirety of Central Michigan women's basketball. And that's 300th in the country. So for them, they're just not very great on that end of the floor. Of course, go look at some of their key players. It's a forward-heavy team, but we start with the guard and Maddie Morrison, 15 points, 4.3 rebounds, shooting 35.5% from the three-point line. You have a forward. Of course, now we're getting to that forward-heavy part. Ayana Sarai Darrington, 12.8 points, 6.5 rebounds, shoots 54.7% from the field. She kind of does her thing down low. You have another forward, Naku Mitchell, 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists per game. And then lastly, another forward, Demetria Pruitt, 7.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 62% from the field. So I feel like a lot of the time, Central Michigan is just like feeding people down low. I mean, obviously, you see with that 318th out of 363 3-point rate, but clearly Central Michigan is just like, okay, let's feed our big girls down low. Excuse me. And I think that's a style that, Kentucky can really sort of take advantage of. I look at this game and all the things I just mentioned. When it comes to my prediction, when it comes to what do I think Kentucky can do in this game, I have the Cats winning 84-39. Kentucky's defense has just been great. And like I've said, I think Central Michigan's just going to play right into that. I think Kentucky puts, a good amount of points on them. I have the Cats winning 84-39 in that contest. And my MVP, who I'm taking to sort of stand out in this game, is going to be Claire Strack. Because, for one, I think those block numbers are going to be up. I wouldn't be surprised if the steal numbers stay up. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a 4-block, 3-steal game or something like that for her. Of course, then I expect her to be able to do her own thing offensively, get some rebounds. Like I think Claire Strack can stuff the stat sheet in this one. I have Kentucky winning, like I said, 84-39. But the main thing is just like, I don't know what I really want to see from this group. Well, first of all, you know what I do want to see from this group? I just want to see them play basketball because we haven't seen them at home since the Purdue game. Right? They've been on the road, they've been on neutral courts. Kentucky's finally at home on Sunday. I think that's what I want to see. I just want to be able to see this team in person again, play some basketball. But to get to I want to say the main point of the episode because it's the namesake of the episode. But I now am going to pose a question of, well, is Kentucky going to head into SEC play with just one loss? Kentucky's 9-1. Are they going to be 10-1, 11-1, 12-1, and then 13-1 heading into that LSU game on the road January 1st? Well, when you look at the remaining games left on the non-conference schedule, you would certainly think so, right? Like I said, Sunday, Central Michigan at home, Belmont on the road next Sunday, and then you have Wright State and Hofstra at home to round things out. Now, that Belmont game, I think, is really tricky. Right, I've talked about Belmont a ton on here. They've kept it close against some teams. They dropped a game they shouldn't have. Like, again, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Ohio State. They kept it close for 90% of the game against all those teams, right? And this can be a scary one for Kentucky. If you remember last year, Kentucky won this game 84-78. So it was already a close game. Like I believe Kentucky started last year. I think every game they had won was by double digits, and this was the game that snapped it last year. Of course, this rounds out a home and home series between the two programs. This will be a good one for the net. I'll actually have to look up Belmont and the net real fast, but Belmont is a really good team. Like I know they have Bart Brooks down there, who, of course, I'll look it up on the wrong tab. So you'll have to give me like 2 seconds here. But Belmont is a team that, again, like they keep it close against all these really good teams. And it's just kind of terrifying to try to sit and watch this group. Okay, so Belmont is 89th in the net. And, of course, I go to my women's basketball quad system rankings. Let's see, a road game against the number 89 team in the net. That is a quad 3 win. It could be quad 2 if they could get top 80, because it looks like a quad 2 win in women's basketball on the road, you have to beat a team between the 46 and 80 spot. And Belmont's currently 89, so that's currently a quad 3 win. But I would assume Belmont can do good in conference play and maybe the rest of non-con, and that could end up being a quad 2 win if you win that game. So, It'd be good. It'd be good to go win that game. And of course, I know the net rankings, it helps if you're able to beat a team by a lot. That's why LSU is so high. They haven't played anyone yet. They played Duke, but oh, look at that. Of course, this is the year Duke starts the year 3-6. Like, you know, like they played Duke on the road, and granted, that's a good win. They beat them by I think like 15, maybe 20. But well, Duke's bad this year. You know, they're preseason number 7 or whatever. Whoop de doo. Well, they're 3-6 to start the year. They kind of suck. Kind of reminds me of another basketball team that had really high expectations and come out the gate really flat and lost games that matter to Power 4 teams. Sounds a little too familiar, right? Anyway, back to the women's basketball team, UK women's basketball. Again, I look at these remaining non-conference games, and it's just Belmont, right? Like it's that December 14th game against Belmont that's really tricky. That kind of has you thinking like, but that's a game Kentucky should win. So I guess really Kentucky should. My voice cracked. Did y'all hear that? Kentucky should head into conference play with just one loss. Believe it or not, when you talk so much, vocal cords, I don't know if they get dry or strained or what, but shout out to this water. Not shout out to my vocal cords right now. But again, I think Kentucky should head into SEC play with one loss. And so you all tell me, like, is Kentucky being 13-1 a success? Like I would say, yeah, I think it would be. But, you look at the non-conference schedule and you look at who Kentucky played, and it's like, well, I guess they should be 13-1. Like, I think it's only a true surprise if they were 14-0 at the end of non-conference play. You know what I mean? Like, you should be 13-1. Like, you're better than Louisville. You're better than Miami. You're certainly better than a Purdue. So, well, I guess they should be 13-1. So I don't know. It's just interesting to me because, Kentucky finished non-conference play last year with one loss. Of course, that one being in the SEC ACC Challenge against North Carolina. That was a blowout loss. That was a horrible game. But, okay, if you can finish, non-conference play with one loss this time around, like I said, I think you head into an LSU game, guys, that I think Kentucky can win. And I predicted Kentucky to win that game before the season started. So now you're starting to look at like, well, your only loss is an 8-point loss to Maryland, a top, 7 team in the country on a neutral court. Well, maybe Kentucky's right there. Like, is Kentucky a top 10 team too? It's just interesting to see. I mean, I think you could still lose that game to LSU, and unless you get blown out, I think you can still be a top 10 team. But we're gonna go ahead and call it there for an episode. Not the most to talk about because, well, I just decided not to talk about the Puerto Rico, those 2 games down there because, look, you didn't really get a whole lot out of Morgan State. Well, first of all, I would have, but we are in this weird time with UK Athletics where, the football program is hiring on people and bringing in recruits as we speak. So we have to make sure we get a lot of time on this channel for football, of course. But also didn't want to really bring up those 2 games. One, because, yes, I think the Maryland game is important, but it was so long ago now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how many – November 26th was that game? Like, that's almost forever ago by now. And then you have Morgan State. You didn't really get a ton out of that. So I thought it was good to come in here and talk about Miami and then Central Michigan. But Kentucky is 9-1 on the year. And like I was just talking about, I think Kentucky should finish non-conference play. I think it's 13-1. I better count that again because I know Kentucky's 9-1, but I'm pretty sure with the 4 extra games, it would be 13-1. So Kentucky 9-1. Scroll down here. So that's 10-1. 11-1, 12-1, 13-1. So yeah, 14 games in non-conference play. Kentucky should be 13-1 come January, but probably be a bad idea for me to look ahead like that too much. So let's just go ahead and say, let's beat Central Michigan. Okay, let's look to the Chippewas, the Fighting Tony Barbies. right? That's the UK connection there, Tony Barbie. Chippewas. What even is a Chippewa, by the way? Can I look that up without getting like is the FBI going to come to my house if I look up what is a Chippewa? Let's see. What is a Chippewa? It is Native Americans. Okay. Native American group called the Chippewas. Okay. I thought it was some kind of like crazy rabbit animal. I didn't know. It's just Native Americans. So shout out Native American folks here on the More Memo. Well, like I said, I'm Phoenix Stevens here on the KSR YouTube channel. We've actually got over 3,000 subscribers since we've last recorded. I go to look down here, 56.4K subscribers. Help us get to 57K, then 60K, and so on. Again, thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Memorial Memo. Like this video if you're still here, if you're still watching. Comment your feedback. Give us feedback. Tell me I suck. Tell me my opinions suck. Or tell me they're great. That would actually be good too. Just tell me I'm great. Whatever. And of course, subscribe to the KSR YouTube channel. But again, Kentucky 9-1. Kentucky beats Miami 64-48. You feel pretty good heading into Sunday's game. I'm Phoenix Stevens. This has been episode 48 of the Memorial Memo, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.